Okay,
That'll mean it's audio only, but that's all we can do. So.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody who's come for this program. This is the third and final installment of our Earth Day celebration. We had a series of different presentations, basically to do with Mother Earth, with nature, and with indigenous teachings. And it's been actually quite successful and popular. We've had quite a crowd come. So I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this. Our speaker today is going to be my big brother, Jason Shriram, and he's going to speak on the hidden life of trees, but also incorporate different teachings about trees and what they have to teach us. So I'm going to hand this over to him. He has quite a presentation. He ran through it with me, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be wonderful. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did with the little tidbit I got about it.
Well, thank you, Ananya, and I really do hope that you find this, all of you find this, a little bit insightful. I want to start off by just starting with a little bit of Theosophy, and then, talk a little bit about why this was of interest to me, and some of the things that inspired me to do this, because I think I'm always intrigued by the word hidden. And there's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of religion, there's a lot of things that relate to hidden. And when I saw the title of this book, The Hidden Life of Trees, I was immediately caught by that, because, we see the physical, but sometimes we feel the connection. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I'll do it about a 10-minute interview that the author of the book gave, Peter Wohlleben, gave to a Scandinavian television show that we'll just watch the YouTube of that interview. Then I've got some readings from the book that I'd like to share, and some slides, because I have the illustrated version, and there's just some fantastic photographs of some of the things that are conceptual to the book that I'll share with you. So I hope you enjoy this talk. But I'd like to start, as I said, with some Theosophy, and it's a reading from The Secret Doctrine, where HPB writes, "The different variations of plants are the broken rays of one ray. As the ray passes through the 7 planes, it is broken on every plane into thousands and millions of rays down to the world of forms, every ray breaking into an intelligence on its own plane, so that we see every plant has an intelligence, or its own purpose of life, so to speak, and its own free will to a degree. This is how I, at any rate, understand it. A plant can be receptive or non-receptive, though every plant, without an exception, feels and has a consciousness of its own." I think this is a great way to start, because what we're learning in our ability to scan physically, scientifically at a deeper level, to look at a deeper level, relates to exactly what HPB wrote in 1881. And she was clued into this way before this became something that we started writing about. My own story here is that I'm a lifetime member of the TS. I'm also a member of the Sierra Club, and I'm on our local board here. And I think that since I've retired from corporate life, one of the questions I've had to ask myself is, what motivates me? And I think speaking for those that can't speak is something that I find not only motivating but critical. And the environment can't speak for itself. The environment, as we all know, I'm certain everyone on this talk understands how the humanity's assault on this environment is changing this planet and in an awful way, and creating such distress and catastrophic extinction. We've lost 50% of the animals on the planet. And the thing that I find that motivates me is that I have 4 little beautiful grandchildren that I look at, and I want them to be able to go to Yosemite, like Peggy's there now, and I want them to be able to walk through a forest. When I was a young boy, my dad, I think it was his way of escaping, would take me on long walks in the forest preserves around my house in Morton Grove. So at a very early age, I started enjoying walks in the woods. And there's definitely a tranquility, and there's a change that one can feel. You feel your blood pressure lower. You feel your body become more tranquil. You feel the elements around you. And I never really quite understood what that was until I started learning about elementals in Theosophy. And I'm going to read a little bit here from the Theo Wiki, but it says, HPB described the elementals as centers of force or energy which are acted upon us while thinking and in other bodily motions. We also act on them and give them form. Elementals are constantly assuming the impression conveyed by the acts and thoughts of that person, and therefore, if he sets up a strong current of thought, he attracts elementals in greater numbers. We've been studying in our lodge the letters, and KH added to this in his first letter to Mr. Hume when he said, "Every thought of a man upon being involved passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity by associating itself with an elemental. That is to say, with one of the semi-intelligent forces of the kingdoms. It survives as an active intelligence, a creature of the mind's begetting for a longer or shorter period, proportionate to with the original intensity of the cerebral action which generated it. Thus, a good thought is perpetuated as an active, beneficent power, an evil one as a maleficent demon. And so man is continually peopling in his current space with a world of his own, crowded with the offsprings of his fancies, desires, impulses, and passions, and a current which reacts upon any sensitive and or any nervous organization which it comes in contact with in its proportion to its dynamic intensity. The adept evolves these shapes consciously, other men throw them off unconsciously." So with those thoughts in mind, I started reading a book by Richard Powers called The Overstory. And you can raise your hand if you've read that book. Some of you might have. But what fascinated me about that book, which kind of led me to this book, was that the story is about elementals. The Overstory is the story of our trees and our forests talking to us, if we're receptive, to talk back to them and begging us to help with the destruction that they're facing. And, you know, as you will hear in this book, The Hidden Life of Trees, the forester who's written the book, Mr. Wohlleben, is talking a lot about the same issue, that these trees, these ancient forests, it's not the trees that people plant in their front yard. It's the ancient forests that have the root systems that are touching each other, that are communicating through fungi and through mosses, and there's electrical stimuli. These forests are intelligent, and they're communities. They're not, a tree is not something that lives in isolation. It lives in a community. And I think you hear this theme a lot in the first book I mentioned, the Overstory. I highly recommend it as something that a little bit there, you know, there's a little bit of a kind of a strange story to it. It reminded me a little bit of Close Encounters of the First Kind, where people are getting messages from the ether that are coming to them, and people are thinking, I need to go to a certain place. I'm being called. I'm being brought somewhere. But I do think that maybe many of us feel called, and at times with things that, you know, that we see and we do. Oh, I need you to allow my screen sharing, Ananya, because as I've given you the host,
There you go. Did you get it?
just a second. It says disable participant screen sharing.
Why is it doing that? I tried to unclick it.
You might have to make him host.
He is the host.
No, you're the host. You have to
Oh,
make.
you made me the host. Okay. All right. Hold on a minute.
I made you the host so that while I was talking, you could let
There you
people
go.
in. Oh, I'm the host now. Okay, good. So I'm going to start with this interview. You may have to turn your volume up a little bit because it's it might be hard to hear. Just a second. Let me see if I can get to. Hello. What was that? Why is it doing this? There we go.
You, in your book, The Hidden Life of Trees, you claim that trees can count, they can learn, they can remember. But please explain this.
I don't claim this. That is actual research. But the scientists always use a language which normally couldn't be understood. And so I translated this, and surprise, surprise, trees are living beings, trees are social, trees have feelings, and yeah, for me it isn't a surprise. I think for you,
Not surprise.
Also not, but yeah, for most people it is yeah, surprising.
You describe them as quite social beings,
Yeah.
and they even have families.
Yeah, right. That is that was
So
yeah.
they couple, right?
Yeah, they for example they suckle their children. Yeah, that is, yeah, you can measure it, that they, yeah, you can say, like a biologist, they pump sugar solution through the roots, which are connected and so on, blah, blah, but that is suckle. They nurse their children, and when you chop those old mother trees, you leave the children alone. And they grow very fast, like pigs in a big stable, which you feed and feed and feed, and which will be slaughtered after several months. And modern forestry don't want to keep trees too long in the forest, because otherwise you don't have too much money when they grow too slow. But mother trees like to keep their children in a very slow growing state, so that they grow up in between, you can say, 200 or 300 years. And that's the youth of a tree, usually, but not in modern forestry.
Do they have friends and enemies among other trees?
Trees are very social among each other, among the same species. And but they have friends, special friends. But it's a problem. You have to grow where your seed comes to the ground, and when beneath you that is someone you don't like, then it's over for a lifetime with friends. And when beneath you grows up a very nice, gentle tree, then those trees connect each other like a couple. And the thick branches are built on the other side, so they don't disturb each other. And when you cut off one of both trees, the other one often dies too, like an old couple where the remaining person says, oh, it doesn't make any sense to live anymore.
Even though it's a different tree? Even
though it's a different tree.
Different tree,
yeah. You can say trees are so connected that you may speak from a superorganism, like ants or bees. The trees work together. They are no individualists.
So how can they work together if they have some kind of enemy?
Yeah, for example, trees talk to each other. Yeah, for example, when a little insect stitches the bark, the tree feels a pain. Yeah, and it hurts him, and so he pumps, for example, a little poison in his bark to kill the beetle. But he also warns the species around its neighbors. And he don't think just at himself. The tree think at his neighbors, at his friends, at his brothers, sisters, and he warns it. Yeah, I say he, she, but it warns with a gas. But gas is problematic because when you have a windy day, the trees which are besides the wind side, they didn't get any warning. And so trees are connected by the roots. And where the roots don't reach, we have a fungi network underground. A fungi network which work like a wood wide web. And there we get
a wood
wide web. And yeah, scientists speak several years from a wood wide web because the whole forest is connected. And through this wood wide web, through this fungi network, there are news sending to all trees, and when an enemy approaches the forest, all trees know what to do. You can measure that. It's working partially electrical, like the internet.
And this, I just have to say it again. This is not fiction. This is something.
No. That's not Lord of the Rings.
This is based on the research. Is it the same with, like, I mean, flowers or other?
Yeah. and even wheat. There's new research on the roots of wheat, and the scientists assume that every plant can hear with the roots. So they make even the trees make noises with the roots in a frequency about 220 hertz. So if you like to talk with trees,
yeah,
you have to look if you hit the tone or so. Yeah, I don't know if it is.
Sorry, but they can actually listen.
Yeah, what you can watch is that the roots, when you have a sound source about 220 hertz, the roots are going this direction. And the wheat roots can click in the frequency of 220 hertz. What this means, I don't know. Scientists are always discovering new things, and with one answer, you have 10 new questions.
Do you actually talk to trees, or have?
I have to admit, I do. I have a big pear tree, that I call Atlas.
Yeah.
That's the heart of the garden.
Yeah.
And I talked to him. I said, hello. Then it's really good fruit. The pears are perfect. So Well, I'm not insane, obviously.
Has it answered yet, or is it?
Yeah, it gives me loads of pears. That's what they do, you know. And it's really good, actually. The whole garden is magic, so yeah.
Yeah, I think you can measure the blood pressure.
It's like a scene from Lord of the Rings.
And, who are you?
But I mean, the thing is that we always talk about the tree huggers, you know, but you really give them sort of credit. We should hug more trees.
Why not? I'm not sure if we can give anything to the trees, but tree huggers don't hurt trees.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? What can I do as just a person to help the trees? What can I do in my personal life? Like, what can I do as a single person?
Yeah, it depends on your life circumstances. For example, we have, the best is to reduce the spending of all resources. It doesn't depend if it is oil, if it is wood, if it is whatsoever, because all connect together. I have the possibility to do more for my forest, but if I were you, I would reduce, for example, a little bit heating. I would buy my wood with a certificate, FSC, for example. That's a little steps, but it helps. Yeah.
Knowing what you know today, and still working with forestry, is it more like being a hunter having seen Bambi? I mean, it's it must be more difficult for you to take down trees.
Yeah, I have also goats, rabbits, and hens, and I eat meat. Because for me, it's no difference to kill an animal or to kill a tree. And I do have to kill anything for surviving. So I do all I do carefully, and then it doesn't matter what I need. So I'm still chopping trees, but for example, we have 15% old beech forests, which are, the forests are 4,000 years old, and that are now reservations. Reservations, for example, which we protect by selling them as living gravestones, the old trees. And you can be buried.
Gravestones.
Yeah, you can be buried. Your ash can be buried at the feet of those old tree, and it is protected for the next 100 years. And that's just one idea.
That's cool. I love that.
Peter, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's an interesting concept, to be able to be buried by a tree. I think I'm going to go with that one. I have a nice stand of spruces in my backyard. Maybe I can just have somebody come over and drop my ashes at the base of the spruces. I wanted to do next a little reading out of the book. A couple of things that, as I said, kind of caught my attention. One was, the first was on tree communication. It's interesting that you just heard him talk about, how trees communicate through the root systems. I think that we kind of knew that trees could communicate. We've always, I think most of the people on this call have had, some base theosophy where we're understanding that there's communication in different realms that aren't necessarily tied to our physical senses. And I think we've kind of learned that about trees as well, that they're communicating in planes we don't understand. The book says, if trees are weakened, it could be that they lose their conversational skills along with their ability to defend themselves. Otherwise, it's difficult to explain why insect pests specifically seek out trees whose health is already compromised. It's conceivable that to do this, insects listen to trees' urgent chemical warnings and then test trees that don't pass the message by taking a bite out of their leaves or bark. a tree's silence could be because of serious illness or perhaps the loss of its fungal network, which would leave the tree cut off from much of the latest news. The tree no longer registers approaching disaster, and the doors are open for the caterpillar and the beetles to attack. So trees communicate by means of olfactory, visual, and electrical signals. But what about sound? Let's go back to hearing and speech. Although I said earlier, trees definitely don't produce sounds, the latest scientific research casts doubt on even this statement. Along with colleagues from Bristol and Florence, Dr. Monica Gagliano from the University of Western Australia has, quite literally, had her ear to the ground. It's not practical to study trees in the laboratory, therefore researchers substitute grain seedlings because they're easier to handle. They started listening, and it didn't take them long to discover that their measuring apparatus was registering roots crackling at the frequency of 220 hertz, as he described in the interview he just did. Crackling roots, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. After all, even dead wood crackles when it's burnt in a stove. But the noises discovered in the laboratory caused the researchers to sit up and pay attention. For the roots of seedlings not directly involved in the experiment also reacted. Whenever the seedling's roots were exposed to a crackling at 220 hertz, they oriented their tips in that direction. That means the grasses were registering in this frequency, so it makes sense that they heard it. Plants communicating by means of sound waves? That makes me curious to know more because people also communicate using sound waves. Might this be a key to getting to know trees better? To say nothing of what it would mean if we could hear whether all was well with the beeches, oaks, and pines, or whether something bad was going on. Unfortunately, we're not that far advanced, and research in this field is just beginning. But if you hear a light crackling the next time you take a walk in the forest, perhaps it's not just the wind. The second concept I wanted to talk about is one I think that's near and dear to the Theosophical teaching, and that's rebirth. As we know, we live many lifetimes according to the ways that we believe in reincarnation and the things that we're taught in Theosophy. We've lived long lives. And what's interesting is trees also do this. When they die, they become hosts to new trees, new critters, new insects, and they spawn thousands and thousands of new colonies of life, even during their rebirth. He says, not every tree is targeted by woodpeckers as a nesting site and doomed to gradual rot. Many trees die quickly. A storm might snap a mighty trunk, or bark beetles might destroy a tree's bark in a few short weeks, causing the leaves to wither and die. The ecosystem around the tree changes suddenly. Animals and fungi that are dependent on the tree pumping a steady source of moisture through its veins or sugar from its crown must now leave the corpse or starve. A small world has come to an end, or has it just begun? For centuries, the trees sucked nutrients from the ground and stored them in their wood and bark, and now it is a precious resource for its children. But they don't have direct access to the delicacies contained in their dead parents. To access them, the youngers need the help of other organisms. As soon as the snapped trunk hits the ground, the tree and its root system become the site of a culinary relay race for thousands of species of fungi and insects. Each is specialized for a particular stage of decomposition and for a particular part of the tree. And this is why these tree species can never pose a danger to a living tree. It would be much too fresh for them. Soft, woody fibers and moist, moldy cells, these are the things they find delicious. Some fungi fight bitterly over the feeding territory. You can see this clearly on dead wood that has been sawn into pieces. You'll find marbleized structures of lighter and darker tissue, clearly separated by black lines. The different shades indicate different species of fungi working their way through the wood. They wall off their territory from other species with dark, impenetrable polymers, which look to us as though they're drawing battle lines. In total, a fifth of the animal and plant species in Central European forests, 60,000 of the species they know about, depend on dead wood. Isn't that amazing? I'm already at a half hour, so I'm going to skip a couple of these. I did prepare preparation skills because they do obviously prepare for winter. So we know that trees have a sense of time because they know when spring is, they know when summer is, they know when fall is, they know when they drop their leaves. And they don't necessarily do it at the same time every year. They do it based on environmental stimuli, but at the same time, it shows us that trees know time. They understand the calendar, they understand the changes of season. But one of the ones that I thought made a lot of sense is the sense of community, because we look at a stand of trees and we see individual trees. What we don't see, the hidden part of it, I think to me, is the community that exists. And this made me think about the TS and the organizational structure of the TS, and going back to the fact that we're trying to become a nucleus of all humanity. And if that's the object, or one of the objects of the Theosophical Society, then we are motivated by community, by necessarily saying that a brotherhood of humanity means a community. It means all living in a harmonious way, in a way that allows us to preserve for next generations, to protect the environment that we live in. And trees also do this. Trees also have a sense of community. He writes, have you ever wondered why giant redwoods in Europe never grow particularly tall? And if you don't know, there are redwood forests in Europe. They're transplanted from redwood forests in California. So even though quite a lot of them are more than 150 years old, very few have topped 160 feet. In their homeland, forests in the western slopes of the Sierra Nevada in California, they easily grow more than twice that size. Why don't they do that in Europe? But if we think back to tree kindergarten, to their extremely long, drawn out youth, we might be tempted to say, these trees, even though 150-year-old, are still children. What do you expect? But that doesn't jibe with the enormous diameters of the older giant redwoods in Europe, which often exceed 8 feet, measured at chest height. Clearly, they know how to grow. They just seem to be putting their energy into growing in the wrong direction. Their location gives us a clue as to why this might be the case. They were often planted in city parks by princes and politicians as exotic trophies. What's missing here, above all, is the forest, or more specifically, relatives. At 150 years old, they are, when you consider a potential lifespan of many thousands of years, indeed only children, growing up here in Europe far from their home and without their parents. No uncles, aunts, no cheerful nursery school. No, they have lived all their lives out on a lonely limb. And what about the many other trees in the park? Don't they form something like a forest? And couldn't they act like a surrogate parent? They usually would have been planted at the same time and could offer the little redwoods no assistance or protection. In addition, they're very, very different kinds of trees. To let lindens, oaks, or beeches bring up a redwood would be like leaving human children in the care of mice, kangaroos, or humpback whales. It just doesn't work, and the little Americans have had to fend for themselves. No mother to nurse them or to keep a strict eye out to make sure the little ones don't grow too quickly. No cozy, calm, moist around them. Nothing but solitude. So I'm closing in towards the end here. So now I'm going to share some pictures and some slides that I'd put together to allow, yeah, just allow you all to see, I think, what this, oh, why is this not going to slideshow? Okay, let's see. Why won't it go to slideshow now? Are you seeing the slide?
Yeah, the slide's there, Jason. Did you try hitting normal at the bottom
Okay,
or this thing, the thing all the way at the left? Yeah.
nothing's clicking, nothing's working.
Yeah, this happened before. This happened to me.
Let me see if I can-
But I think everyone can see the screen. I mean, it's clear.
maybe if I
So
close it and reopen it. Hold on a second. Maybe if I close this all and then I reopen.
Close the where it asks you to save the files on the right, on the left-hand side.
Yep. Okay, maybe if I do that and I reopen it, perhaps it'll unlock.
yeah, I haven't figured out why it freezes.
I did it.
I can see the screen fine.
Okay, we've done it.
You've got both screen, you've got it's showing 2 slides.
Go to the duplicate.
Yeah, there are two in my
There's
screen.
two.
It's on presenter presentation.
Go up to your display settings.
I had this all set.
Right.
No worries.
I hit duplicate and then it did work. Okay. How's that?
Yep, it came up.
Okay. So just a few, those were the readings I just gave. I stopped a little early, but the last one was, that as we know, trees impact the environment greatly. But one thing that the book talks about as well is trees do create their own environment. And I did want to relate that a little bit to a couple of years ago when we went to Alaska and we went through some of the deepest beech forests in British Columbia. And if anyone ever gets a chance to go to the northern beech forests and the pine forests at the top of this earth someday, whether you're in Siberia, whether you're in Alaska, whether you're in northern Canada, the area where trees reign and humans have very little impact is a special place on the planet. And I hope everybody someday has either had a chance to go to those locations or gets a chance to go, because the trees build the environment. They aren't I would say beholden to what we provide them in that environment. They build their own environments, and it's pretty amazing. So the first quote I had is, the tree's most important means of staying connected to other trees is the wood wide web of soil fungi that connect vegetation in an intimate network that allows the sharing of an enormous amount of information and goods. And I kind of related that to Master KH saying, every diamond, every crystal, every plant and star has its own individual soul, besides man and animal. And there's a hierarchy of souls from the lowest forms of matter up to the world soul. And you can see, these are all pictures that I've taken from the book for the slides. You can see this network. You can see the connection that the roots make to the mosses and to the fungi, and how they start to work their way out and expand to other mosses and fungi. Some of you may have seen that about I think it was about a year ago, they decided that in Oregon, there's one moss that covers almost a third of the state of Oregon. And the forestry department named it the largest living organism on the planet.
It's a fungi, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a fungi. Yeah. But it's a whole part of the temperate rainforest in Oregon, which is pretty fantastic. When trees grow together, nutrients and water can be optimally divided among them so that each tree can grow to the best tree it can be. If you help individual trees by getting rid of their supposed competition, the remaining trees are bereft. They send messages out to their neighbors in vain because nothing remains but stumps. And here again, you can see trees latching onto each other, sharing their root systems, sharing nutrients. If one tree becomes hungry and another tree has excess, they share. We know they send nutrients to each other in order to live in community, which is a pretty amazing thing. Acorns and beech nuts fall at the feet of large mother trees who pass their legacy on to the next generation and exert their influence on the upbringing of their offspring. Mother trees shade their offspring with their massive canopies, so they take many years to grow and flourish, preserving the family structure. So they don't just have these new trees grow right away. They only get 5% of the light that they need from the shading by their mother trees, which stunts their growth and allows them to become stronger, so that when the mother tree does eventually die, the offspring are stronger and more resilient and ready to become the parent trees. And this is a beautiful picture of beech nut seedlings that are being spread about in the forest that's in the book. There are more life forms in a handful of forest soil than there are people on the planet. A mere teaspoonful contains many miles of fungal filaments. All of these work the soil, transform it, and make it so valuable for the trees. And you see little friends that live in the trees peeking out. And just kind of a vast walk through the trees. The trees in the forest care for each other, sometimes even going so far as to nourish the stump of a felled tree for centuries after it was cut down by feeding it sugars and other nutrients, and so keeping it alive. Only some stumps that are thus nourished. Perhaps they are the parents of trees that make up the forests of today. This one was interesting, again, going back to my trips to Alaska and Siberia. Sometimes the ground itself can move. You see instances of this in Siberia and Alaska where the permafrost is thawing. And this is, of course, one of the great impacts of global climate change that's happening is we're losing so much permafrost in the northern forests. The trees are impacted by this because they lose their footing and they're being thrown completely off balance as the subsoils become soggy. Each individual tree points in a different direction. It looks like a group of drunks staggering around. So they call these drunken forests. And there's a picture of a drunken forest. And when you know that trees experience pain and have memories and that tree parents live together with their children, you can no longer just chop them down and disrupt their lives with large machines. This is a big part of what the Overstory was about as well, that these trees are families and they experience pain. And, we have to do what we can to preserve them. And I love the comment that the one girl made in the interview where she said, "What can I do?" I thought that was a great question. Because in the case of Switzerland, the whole country is concerned with species appropriate treatment of things green. The constitution of the country of Switzerland reads in part that account is to be taken of the dignity of creation when handling animals, plants, and other organisms. And I think that's just a beautiful way to look at things. We shouldn't look at material as trees as material. We need to look at them as living sentinel beings. And, I think the whole point of this book and this talk. So just to finish, there are a couple other reference materials I wanted to leave you with. One is there's another scientist, her name is Susan Simard, and there's a wonderful TED Talk that's on the internet by Suzanne Simard called How Trees Talk to Each Other. I mentioned the book, The Overstory by Richard Powers. And then also the president of the Blavatsky Lodge in London, Petra Meyer, has a wonderful talk on YouTube called Sentient Nature and Its Hidden Wonders. And she talks a lot about the nature of plants, the nature of animals, and those hidden wonders behind the things that, and when we say hidden, the things that we don't see on the physical plane that are going on behind the scenes. And that concludes what I had to prepare for today.
Jason, do you think that perhaps we could send this PowerPoint out to the participants? I've noticed there's people that are writing furiously.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. I will, let me send you the latest update this afternoon, and you can send it out. Because
Okay,
the one I sent you has been changed.
okay.
I changed things up until the minute before I present them.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Anania, for that.
Oh, of course.
Actually, what I was doing was not writing, I was writing furiously some references that I thought might also be helpful. I'm very much into trees and reading about trees and researching them. The Hidden Life of Trees, the illustrated version that you recommended, Jason, reminded me very much of one of my favorite photographers, Beth Moon. If you've never seen her works, she does pictures of, she has a couple of books. One is called Ancient Trees, and another one is Ancient Skies, Ancient Trees. She does a lot of black and white photography as well as color photography, but her books are truly remarkable. I can't recommend them highly enough. And it also brought me, I grew up, as you know, Ananya, in Southeast Asia. So the tree life that's there is very different than what we see in the Northern hemispheres. And so it's interesting to me to read, and Beth Moon kind of transitioned. She does a lot of trees in Africa. So the jungle life is so teeming, and the trees there are so interdependent that it's very easy to see how much they communicate and rely on each other and other organisms. So that's a remarkable thing to me, is to look into that a little bit more. And I didn't know that much about northern forests and trees. But one book that really was eye-opening for me was called American Canopy by Eric Rutlow, Eric Rutlow.
Lane, can you put it in the chat? The references of the books and the names?
I can. That book was hard to read. It really talks about how Europeans, especially coming to this country, devastated our forests. Really, the impact that we had. It was a hard book to read, but such a valuable one for me. And then just the last one was a personal note. My grandson just graduated from high school, and he wrote a short story that was published. And it's about a person that wakes up with a consciousness. He has no physical form that he can feel, but he's aware that there's others around him. And he comes to realize over the progress of the story that he's become mycelium. So the thought is that humans, when we pass on, become part of the larger organism of the earth, and become part of that network of mycella that we were talking about. So I thought that was, it touched me very deeply, but I just love this talk. So thank you so much, Jason. It just went back and reminded me to go back and look through my books again and pull out the good ones. So thank you.
Sure.
So if anyone has any other comments or have any questions or something to contribute, you're welcome to unmute yourself and go ahead and just speak. Maria?
Just another one small reference by Dora Van Gelder, later Dora Koons, has written The Real World of Fairies, which is much more mature and interesting than the title suggests. She has a section on trees, and especially on the redwoods, what she calls the adepts of their kingdom. She talks about how wise they are, how they converse with one another, how they see their family fall, how they endure fire and other hardships, and how much they have to give us if we're ready to listen. It's just it's a wonderful book that's as appropriate for children of a certain age as it is for us.
Maria, do you want to give the name of the book again?
The Real World of Fairies, Dora Van Gelder.
I need,
You know,
I need to,
I debated talking about some of the places that I've been, and you know, obviously Adyar is an old forest, and I think part of the beauty of Adyar is the fact that it's this preserved place. But there, you know, some of the theosophical centers that we have in our own organization are just fantastic places because they've been preserved through the modern time where, you know, so much of the land has been sold off. Even Alcott, if you go to Wheaton, and you know, the trees there are old and thick and healthy and beautiful. But I was thinking of Van Dorden Garden as well, you know, the fairies, you mentioned the fairies, and you know, we talk about Pumpkin Hollow, another place that kind of has special, I think, you know, entities, whether they're fairies, whether they're elementals, you know, kind of maybe the same kind of a concept, but really wonderful facilities that the TS has. And that's something I'd encourage everybody, if you've got a Theosophical Center or get a chance to go to one, whether it's Pumpkin Hollow or Island, there's so many amazing facilities that this society has done a good job preserving.
Camp Far Horizons in the Sierras is like a little mini Yosemite with no people.
Yeah.
And enormous, magnificent bristlecone pine, which are very amazing, wonderful, and rare trees.
Yeah.
I highly recommend Far Horizons. Peggy and I are both teaching there at the end of August, if anybody
Fabulous.
wants to come.
Some years ago, when I was in Chicago, I had a couple of experiences with the trees because I don't know why, but when I lived in my home and looked across the street, there was a big willow. And I remember one time sitting and watching the snowfall and being kind of mesmerized, and the willow spoke to me, but it was a very booming voice and it threw me out of that mesmerized state. So it just kind of came boom. And I was like, oh, I wish I could have heard you. And then I walked out on my patio. On my deck, I had a Bradford pear. And I distinctly heard that humans are descended from tree spirits. And I looked at the tree and I just said, well, thank you very much. And a couple of weeks later, maybe 5, maybe 6 weeks later, I was walking through this crystal store and there was one of those resource cards that was laminated, and it was the Celtic tree, the 13 trees that represent the Celtic months. And it just drew me, and I looked, and right across the top in very tiny letters, it said the Celts believed that humans were descended from tree spirits. And I thought, oh, there you have it. So.
Oh.
Melania, what was the name of the author of the book, The Hidden Life of Trees? Again, I didn't write it down before.
Jason, do you want to put it in the chat so
I'm
people
happy
have the
to, yeah.
spelling?
I'm happy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, my point is that our trees, you know, communicate with us all the time. And we, you know, by talking to them, as the gentleman said, we communicate back.
Mm. Maria, did you have another comment?
Yeah, thing that surprised me about the interview with Peter is that he doesn't make a distinction, as we do in Theosophy, by levels of consciousness in different beings. So for him, the sentience of trees is no different from the sentience of the intelligence of his goats and his hens and the others that he uses also for food.
Well,
So I felt that was a strange inability to think of life in all its levels of consciousness and to approach them with a little bit of a different eye.
Was it
Well,
maybe his justification for consumption? That's not how it felt to me.
well, I don't see it that way. I mean, everyone can have their own opinion, but I'm telling you, when I've talked to trees, I haven't found any difference in their consciousness between theirs and mine. And when I would first take carrots out of the ground, I could hear them scream. So I'm not sure that it's any different to eat a carrot or to, you know, I mean, there is a difference between a big, huge cattle farm, you know, and going out and communicating with the deer and, you know, and all of that. But anyway, you know, that's just my experience.
But I think that might be the point that Maria's making, or perhaps I'm overspeaking, but, you know, she may be saying that he has such reverence for trees, but how come that doesn't translate into the equal reverence for all animals and sentient beings?
He was pretty clear about his reverence for those animals he was eating. You
And
know,
yet they're still consumed.
Is that like the honorable harvest concept, maybe?
You know, with grace, sure.
Mhm.
Or the way Native Americans, you know, when they kill an animal, they honor its spirit, they thank it for its sacrifice. I mean, I kind of heard a little bit of that in when he talked about animals.
Well, we do that with just about when we put tobacco down, not only when harvesting animals, but just daily when we go out and find a tree and you talk to it and you put the tobacco down and honor it, and you say you're grateful for being able to appreciate who and what they are. And I think the same thing is true with animals, not just when you have to harvest them, but also on a daily basis. I just noticed outside my window that there's a blue jay out there that looks like he has walked on. And one of the things I'm going to do after this conversation is go out and make sure that he's well attended to. And it's part of the circle of life, you know. What do we need to subsist and to grow? What do trees need to subsist and to grow? Plants, and life is life, and we don't even just think of trees and plants as living things. We think of everything in our environment as living. It's all part of a greater. I think you mentioned it, Jason. You know, the smaller parts that make up the whole, like, you know, the grains of sand on a beach, or the you know, that we're all stardust, that concept. So just honoring that and acknowledging our interdependence, maybe.
Hi, Jason. Great talk. Edgar Casey said that plants were designed for humans to eat, animals not so, and that there's a process by where humans ingesting the plants somehow help the plant grow or help it with its evolution somehow. I don't know how that breaks down. I have a question, Jason. In the beginning, you had a great quote from HPB.
Yes.
Can you tell me where I can find that?
I'll send it to you.
Okay. And so I understand trees talk in deep bass voices. Do you think bass players are more have a relationship with trees more than lead guitar players?
I don't know. I can't answer that one.
You know, I did read, and we did talk about this in braiding sweetgrass. There was a whole study that Robin Kimmer's student had done about growing sweetgrass and whether, you know, not harvesting it actually did harm to the plants or it benefited the plants. And what it showed was that harvesting is a natural process that plants actually need us to do, not to decimate the plants, but to harvest plants in an ethical way so that it stimulates actually the roots of plants and it allows seedlings to have room to grow, and it actually benefits the plants. And so that was a very interesting way of looking at it, that there's almost like this stimulation that needs to be done in order for life to keep on going.
Same thing happens with wild rice when they harvest wild rice.
Right, exactly. And so it's different way of looking at things.
I bring up something here. I don't know what help we can be with those drastic fires in Southern California when there's all those, you know, with the fire of those wonderful trees. Is there any, I know the healing energy, but how can we, is there anything that we can do on a spiritual level to help those trees that when there are forest fires and things like that? I don't know.
Jason, does Peter mention anything about that in his book? Or did you see?
But I think the thing that I would say is that I'm amazed. When I was driving through Alaska in 1997, they had tremendous fires in the Alaskan forest. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 3% of the pine forests burnt in Alaska. It was 1997, 98. There were just horrible, horrible fires up there. And we went through in 2018, and the forests are doing an amazing job of regrowing. You'd be just shocked at how tall the new births are and how the forest actually does manage to regrow itself. And one thing that you learn by thinking in this way is that time for trees is a long time compared to human time. They don't live at the same pace we do, right? So seeing this, you know, the devastation that happened, there's photographs of where these fires occurred, and then seeing that the saplings are now 30, 40, 50 feet high, and here it is only 20 years later. It was very empowering to me to see that.
Think of Mount St. Helens.
Yeah.
How quickly that recovered. People
Did it
thought that
recover pretty well too? I haven't seen what it looks like now, but certainly that was a devastating blow.
Yeah, within a year, plant life was regenerating. So it's that's one of the things too. You talked about fires, and Diane, maybe this will help a little bit. When Europeans first came to this country and saw what they thought were pristine old forests. What they didn't realize is that forests have been managed by indigenous peoples for millennia, and that fire was one of the tools that they used to manage forests, and a certain amount of it is needed by some trees. But what we're seeing happening on the West Coast with droughts is a lot has to do with the way man has managed water, and how we're not very good about listening to our environment and taking lessons from them on how to manage forests and trees. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting that, you know, when you first come to a new place and you think, wow, this is the way it's always been, that might not be true.
I was going to say that one of the things I think we could do, Diane, is that we really need to start listening to nature.
Mhm.
We really, really do. We're supposed to be caretakers of the earth. I mean, every story from every indigenous tradition, whether it is Celtic, whether it is, you know, Native Americans, whatever it is, South Americans, have always talked about the fact that human beings are here to be caretakers, and we don't caretake, we consume.
The Aborigines in Australia.
Yeah, the Aborigines in Australia, exactly. But you go back as far as time, you know, the written word. I mean, they talk about this when the stories were put onto paper and written. The story is the same. We're supposed to be caretakers.
I could
Are
leave
there
you
any
with a
other
really
comments?
And guess where paper comes from?
I could leave
Yeah.
you with a really quick, sweet, kind of sweet story. When I was in the 6th grade, we had to have a science project. And so 4 little girls went and picked out 2 patches of wild weed morning glories. And we, every noontime, at lunchtime, we would go out and sing to one patch and not sing to the other. We never watered them. We didn't feed them. We just sang to them. And the patch that we sang to doubled in size, where the other one didn't grow at all, so, or barely grew. So we can talk to nature, to the trees, to the flowers, to the plants. We can appreciate them. And just that very thing changes us and changes them. So if we want something to do, it's that easy.
What did you sing?
I was 12. I have no idea. Row, row, row your boat, probably.
Linda?
I had a question that just popped in my head a bit ago. When we tap the maple sap from the maple trees, is that harmful to the trees? I know they do it with other walnuts and so forth too. It doesn't harm them. Okay. Can you elaborate on that, someone?
Yeah, so we've got a native community in Michigan that it does sugar bush every year, and they do it the old way with large copper pots and outdoors, and they camp out for like 2 weeks while they tap the maple syrup. No, it's done in such a way as to it doesn't harm the tree at all. I mean, otherwise you'd put yourself out of business if you could only tap a tree once. So they tap them year after year. It does not harm them, but it's important to remember, like bees with honey, it takes 40 gallons of syrup to make 1 gallon, 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. So it's very labor intensive.
And the tree wouldn't produce the sap if it didn't have the extra sugar in it to be able to be tapped. And they don't tap the same trees every year. They do an alternating thing to be able to allow the trees to recuperate.
Right.
One thing I would say is that it's a little like giving blood.
Yes.
Where you regenerate, the tree regenerates the sap. We regenerate blood when we give blood, right?
Linda, if you haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass, I don't know if you've read it or not.
I'll put it in the notes.
You're muted. I'm sorry.
I'll put it in the notes.
But she does talk about tapping the maple trees.
Thank you so much, Jason and Ananya. Thank you.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad all of you could come.
Thank you so much.
Been great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Nice seeing you again,
Glad
Diane.
you all appreciated it. Blessings to you all this summer.
Thank you.
Joyce and forests.
It's always good to see everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I always learn something. So let's do more of these.
I look forward to the
Thank
next
you very
one.
much.
Well, thank you, Charles, for coming.
Yes, it's very, very illuminating, and I look forward to any notes that come out of this that I can follow up, TED Talks, YouTube, and so forth. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure to get the PowerPoint sent out, and then I believe Jason's got notes in there on the final resource page.
Yep.
So,
I don't know how the chat notes will be can be captured if people are interested in reference materials.
well, I could take a picture of it.
And normally in your chat window, if you look at the bottom right, on ours, it says file, right next to it has 3 dots. And if you click on that, it'll say save file. So that'll save the entire chat into a file. That's
Oh,
handy.
there we go. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you.
The amount of things that we learn from using Zoom. Okay, are there any other final comments or questions?
Yes, I am Ananya. I will add that I have had wonderful experiences talking not just to trees, but to stones.
Mm-hmm.
I am conscious that they are also alive, that the atoms within them are moving at incredible speeds, and they're not dead things, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I've had that experience as well, Adharmas. It is kind of surprising to me that the difference in stories that you get from the stones that come from the ocean versus the stones that you find that, you know, are tucked away in the earth and have been sitting there for you don't know how long. It's just the energy of the earth talking to you, and it's really quite amazing.
I know it. It's beautiful. All we
Volcano.
have to do is feel it.
Yeah.
I have some very interesting conversations with the stone circles in Scotland. You talk about ancient standing stones that are 3,000 years old. And we did a tour of different ones. And it was just amazing. So I have a journal that I wrote all the messages that I got as I was traveling, and they were pretty profound. They're just, yeah, those are the ancient bones of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
They have a lot of wisdom.
The basis for the Outlander series.
Yeah, well, we were actually one of that same stone circle that was
There you go.
at the Highlanders.
It's
Our
amazing.
guide said at one time it was just a lonely little place that nobody went to. And once it went on TV, he said thousands of people come there every year. In fact, the man used to go there to meditate, but he had to find a new place.
That's like Stonehenge, is that if you ever go there, the power you can feel, it vibrates. It really, really does.
Yes, it certainly does. And the weird thing is, when I went to Machu Picchu, after having been at Stonehenge, I could tell that they were communicating. At Stonehenge to Machu Picchu, there was a very vibe that could go through the earth, and I was just, it blew me away.
Well, that's what our guide told us, that there is a mountain in Scotland, right near the early home of John Muir, called Mount Schiehallion, that was in the same direct path of Mount Shasta in California. They were connected by a ley line, and that the two mountains were sending energy back and forth across that meridian and in communication.
Well, you think about the Ring of Fire in the Pacific, they talk to each other. Those volcanoes when the earth moves, it's not a separate happening. And you hear a lot more about volcanoes now that are re-emerging, re-erupting, that have lain dormant for quite a while. So things are on the move. The earth's speaking to us in a way that we need to listen to.
Yeah, even in, what's it, Yellowstone, the place that gets really, really hot.
Yes, it's actually Yellowstone is the surface where the Old Faithful is actually the top of a super, they say it's a super magma, super volcano. So
it's heating up. They're noticing that it's getting hotter and hotter, and actually some of the stuff is rising closer to the surface. So we may see that go one day.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go, it just changes form.
This is true.
That's
Everything.
There's no dead matter, remember Blavatsky.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
There's what do they say, that there's no, it's just an exchange of energy. There's no positive or negative, that it all evens out in the long run, that everything that's here is always going to be here.
Yeah, Einstein said energy is not created or made, it just changes form.
Exactly. Oh,
created or destroyed, it just changes form.
I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, Einstein was pretty good.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I have to go now.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up.
Jason, it was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Many
Thank
hugs.
you very much, all of you. Bye.
My best.
Bye.
Bye.
Maria, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Keep those rabbits going. Love you guys.
Love you too. Take care.
Bye.